$40, you get Chick-fil-A, you get barbecue, breakfast. Is that we are better to yeah. I don't want to be that guy. So anyways, register today, and this is the cut. Right. But anyways, we're going to hang out over there. It's called Pizza Pastor. I would love to have lunch with you all. If you want to join us, we're going to be over there. It's a good time to hang out. You can order whatever you want. They have fabulous wings, by the way. So anyhow, check that out. And then lastly, I just wanted to share this verse with you. It's found in Acts. Acts 20, verses 35. It says, "In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the meek, remembering the words of the Lord Jesus himself, saying, 'It is more blessed to give than to receive.'" And sometimes it is work to be in the battle. It is work to care for others, to put others' needs first. But I just want to encourage you, we want to be a church that's a blessing. We want to be like a blessing machine. And so it truly is more blessed to give than to receive. I don't know if you've ever seen those like those shows where there's like this undercover rich guy, and he goes around and he visits different organizations, and at the end of the show he like blesses all these people. But what's so impactful is it makes such an impact on that person's life. You know, they're wealthy, they have all that money can buy, but just in giving, it really does trigger a wonderful response, that it's truly more blessed to give than to receive. And we're created in God's image, so when we are generous, it really triggers who we're created to be. So anyways, thank you guys so much for your gifts. You can give online in the back. There's boxes there. A lot of you guys give online or through your banking or whatever. You can also mail it if you, I'm not sure how many people mail it. But anyhow, thank you guys so much for your generosity. And it is my pleasure to bring up Pastor Paul Mickelsen, one of our serving elders. Give him a big, he's going to be sharing the word today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to get right into the message, okay? Got a lot to cover. We're in Joshua chapter 13. I've entitled this Living East of Jordan. Living East of Jordan, okay? I came across something written by a Christian podcaster that I like named Russell Moore. During the time of the recent solar eclipse, he was in New England, and that was right in line with the full eclipse. Okay, so that's kind of the background of where we're going here. So he writes, "Some colleagues and I drove to a small village in Vermont right in line with the totality of the solar eclipse. Even before the sky darkened, I was mesmerized by the people gathering in the town square, each with a sense of anticipation and excitement over the shared experience. We ended up standing on the front lawn of someone's house, eating sandwiches while we waited for the sun to hide. The homeowners sat on their stoop and were not only unperturbed by our camping out on their property, but seemingly enjoying the chance to welcome people to their place." And then he goes on to write, "Several articles this week noted how the eclipse seemed to have the effect of bringing out kindness and connection in collective wonder." Isn't that interesting? Many of us have an inherent desire and need for belonging, for connection. And that idea of belonging is something that I'm going to come back to and hit quite a bit today, okay? It's the reason for the long-standing success of a television program like Friends, which I'm pretty sure two of my adult daughters would say that was their absolute favorite show of all time. And then another one similar is Cheers, where you want to be at a place where everybody knows your name, right? We have that desire for connection because God created us that way. He created us with the need, and it's inherent within us for relational connection with others, both with Him and with people. It's who we are. It's our identity. So we have that need and that desire to just belong that I believe is in at least most of us, if not all of us. In today's lesson, we're going to see the value and the benefit of simply belonging, and then the potential dangers of being on the outside, or what I'm going to call the periphery. My wife, as I was talking to her about this, didn't like the word periphery. She thinks that's an old-fashioned word, but you understand what I mean by that, don't you? So I'm going to go ahead and use that word on the periphery. Okay? Don't tell her. Context in Joshua, we're in Joshua chapter 13. There's kind of a natural division between chapter 12 and chapter 13. So chapter 1 to 12 is the conquering of the land of Canaan. The Israelites have marched up to the Jordan River. As we begin Joshua, they're on the east side of the Jordan. They're ready to cross Jordan. First town that they conquer is Jericho, and we've been all through that, the story of Rahab and so forth. And then through chapter 12 is the conquering of all the enemies and the forces in the land of Canaan and settling there. Okay? So when we get to chapter 13, we've got several chapters now in the book that are going to be devoted to the allotting of the land, the directing of the land, the actual geographical identity that each of the 12 tribes of Israel is going to receive as their inheritance, and then possessing that land. So that's where we're at when we begin in chapter 13. So in Joshua chapter 13 is where the allotment of the land to the 12 tribes really begins. Okay? So chapter 13, verse 6. Now, those first several verses in Joshua, I didn't put that on there, but that's just kind of wrapping up some of the other kings in the land of Canaan that still need to be conquered at this point. And most of the battle and warfare is done, but there's just a few left. But beginning there with chapter 13, verse 6, the last part of verse 6, God is speaking, and He says to Joshua, allot the land to Israel for an inheritance as I have commanded you. So the military campaign at this point is finished. They've conquered most of the land. Everything is taken care of. And now it's time to begin assigning to the tribes their exact geographical identity in the land. Okay, then we go to verse 7, and God is speaking to Joshua. And He says, now therefore divide this land for an inheritance to the 9 tribes and half the tribe of Manasseh. And what He's speaking of there is the tribes that are to the west of the Jordan River. There are 9.5 tribes that were to be allotted their inheritance on the west side of the Jordan River. So that's the first mention, the first identity, or the first attention that Moses or Joshua gives is to those 9.5 tribes on the west side of the Jordan River. And we would call that Canaan proper. Okay? But interestingly, in assigning the specifics then, which is going to be much of the rest of the book of Joshua, he begins first with the eastern 2.5 tribes. So that's where the rest of chapter 13 is, and that's where we're going to be looking at today, is those eastern 2.5 tribes. So we come to chapter 13, verse 8. With the other half of the tribe of Manasseh, and the Reubenites and the Gadites received their inheritance, which Moses gave them beyond the Jordan eastward, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave them. So if we've got, I think the next slide should be the map. Yeah. I don't know how well you can see that. But if you look on the right side, that's, for those of you that are directionally challenged, that's the east side. Okay. So we've got 3 tribes that are on the east side. That would be Reuben on the south, and then Gad, and then Manasseh. And you see how Manasseh is kind of split? Half of it's on the west, and half of it's on the east. And then down the middle there is the Jordan River Valley. Okay, so we've got kind of a natural barrier between those tribes that are on the east and all the rest of them that are assigned their area on the west. And then you've got 2 bodies of water. In the north is what later came to be known as the Sea of Galilee, and on the south is the Dead Sea, and then the Jordan River Valley is this natural barrier that goes down in between those two. So there's really, you can see separation between the east and the west. Okay? So we go now to verse 15, chapter 13, verse 15, And Joshua lays out the specifics of the geographical area that's going to go to Reuben. That would be the southernmost tribe on the east side. So I'm just going to read verse 15 and then verse 23. So verse 15, and Moses gave an inheritance to the tribe of Reuben according to their clans. And then he gives the specifics of the exact geographical direct area, which we don't need to go into. And then verse 23, this was the inheritance of the people of Reuben according to their clans with their cities and villages. And then next he goes to the inheritance of Gad. So verse 24, Moses gave an inheritance also to the tribe of Gad, to the people of Gad, according to their clans. And then we'll skip, he gives the exact geographical area and then ends it with this, verse 28. This is the inheritance of the people of Gad, according to their clans with their cities and villages. Okay, I know it's a little boring, but we're going to, there's a point here and we're moving fast, okay? Stay with me. Verse 29, the inheritance of one half of Manasseh. So it says, and Moses gave an inheritance to the half tribe of Manasseh. It was allotted to the half tribe of the people of Manasseh according to their clans. And we've got a summary in verse 32. These are the inheritances that Moses distributed in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan, east of Jericho. Okay. So how did this come about that we've got 2.5 tribes on the east? Well, with the map, it would have been on your right. Okay, and the other 9.5 would be on the left or on the west. So we need to go into the backstory here, and the backstory of how this came about is Numbers 32. And we're going to spend some time in chapter 32. I want to go through the scripture to set it up, and then after we've gone through the scripture, there's going to be a lot of reading, and I kind of semi-apologize to you for how much reading we're doing, but not really. I'll go through it kind of fast, okay? But then we're going to talk about, okay, so what does this mean afterwards? Okay, so Numbers 32. In Numbers, the book of Numbers describes the journeying of the Israelites from their wilderness wanderings in the south up the east side of the Dead Sea. They come through Moab and they conquer all the area of Moab and the kings of the Amorites that are on the east. And then they come up to basically the Jordan River, and they're ready then to cross into Canaan, coming through along the east side of the land of Canaan. And so when they're there getting ready to go across the Jordan to conquer the land, we've got this story about the people of Reuben and the people of Gad. So we're in Numbers 32, verses 1 to 5. Now the people of Reuben and the people of Gad had a very great number of livestock. And they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. So the people of Gad and the people of Reuben came and said to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and to the chiefs of the congregation, and I have skipped, we've got several names that are hard to pronounce. The land that the Lord struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. And they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. Okay, so they have decided in a very practical sense, this is a good place for us to stay. This is where God wants us to be. There's much pasture land here, and we've got flocks and we've got herds, and this would be ideal. And so do not take us across the Jordan River. Well, Moses didn't take well to their request. And so, in fact, he's pretty ticked off. Okay, so verse 6, chapter 32, verse 6, next slide. Moses said to the people of Gad and to the people of Reuben, shall your brothers go to the war while you sit here? Will you discourage the heart of the people of Israel from going over to the land that the Lord has given them? Your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the heart of the people of Israel from going into the land that the Lord had given them. Okay, so now we're going to continue on to the next slide now. There we go. And the Lord's anger was kindled on that day, and he swore, saying, surely none of the men who came up out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me. None except Caleb the son of Jephunneh, and the Kenizzite, and Joshua the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. And behold, you have risen in your father's place, a brood of sinful men, to increase still more the fierce anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will again abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all of this people. And so, he's not taking this real well, their request. You're just like your ancestors. So he's going back 40 years when they were first getting ready to go into the land. And you remember a group of spies went in, and only 2 of those spies says, we can do this. The rest of the spies, there were 12 total, said, no, we can't. We don't have the strength. We don't have the numbers. They're stronger than us. It won't work. And so he says, you're just like them. They discouraged the hearts of the people, and you're doing the same thing. And they did not enter Canaan, and they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. And then he says, shall your brothers go to war while you sit here and do nothing? You're going to discourage all the rest of the people. And he just blatantly says, you're sinful in this. Kind of harsh. But then we've got the response of Reuben and Gad. And the thing is that the response is very positive. Okay, so follow with me verses 16 to 19. Then they, that would be Reuben and Gad, came near to him and said, we will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones. But we will take up arms ready to go before the people of Israel until we have brought them to their place. And our little ones shall live in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the people of Israel has gained his inheritance. For we will not inherit with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us on this side of the Jordan to the east. So it's a positive response. We will build sheepfolds and cities here. But we will then go to battle in Canaan with the rest of Israel. Our children and wives will stay here, okay, while we go. And then we will not return to our homes until all of Israel has received their inheritance. Okay, so it just shows it was a positive response. And Moses agrees. So verse 20. So Moses said to them, if you will do this, if you will take up arms to go before the Lord for the war, and every armed man of you will pass over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven out his enemies from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then after that you shall return and be free of obligation to the Lord and to Israel. And this land shall be your possession before the Lord. But if you will not do so, behold, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. That was one of the first verses I learned as a little kid in Sunday school. Be sure your sin will find you out. That's ingrained in my memory. But he agrees. Okay, he listens to what they say, and he recognizes they're coming from a right place. They're not coming from a wrong place. And he agrees to it. So if they will do what they have said, if they will go with the rest of the army over and do battle and warfare with the rest of their brothers, and finish that until all of their brothers have received their inheritance, then they can return afterwards, and it will be all good. But if they stop in the middle, if they return early, if they don't follow what they've said they do, then they have sinned. And so we have a little note. I don't have this on a screen, but the half-tribe of Manasseh kind of snuck in there with them. It's kind of interesting that the tribe of Manasseh, which is a family, they're all related by blood, half of them said, well, we'll go on over into the west side, and other half said, no, we want to stay on the east side. So does that happen in families sometimes? Right down the middle. So that's why we've got 9.5 on the west and 2.5 tribes on the east. Okay. I dealt with this question as I was planning and working on this. Is there a negative on what these tribes were wanting to do and their request to stay on the east? And the answer is not necessarily. It depends. So it was a practical decision. There's nothing wrong in this. The land that they saw on the east was great pasture land. It was very green and probably different than the rest of the tribes. They were tribes that in particular were shepherds and herdsmen, and they had a lot of flocks and a lot of cattle. So it was a very practical decision, and that's why they made it. And so that land was convenient and very appealing to them. Okay? But yet Moses is concerned. And so we see that the background for why he's so concerned is that the promise of God, the inheritance of the people of Israel, was Canaan proper, which Canaan proper is on the west side. Okay? So Moses knew this. That was the area that had been sworn by God to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob and to their ancestors. That was where God's plan was. And so that's why Moses is concerned. And if we could look at the next slide again, it's the map. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the natural division. I just want you to look at that again. We've got the body of water in the north, which is later came to be known as the Sea of Galilee, and then the big body of water in the south, which is the Dead Sea. And then in between, there's this Jordan River Valley. It's a natural barrier. So there is a separation geographically. That's kind of what I want us to see there. There's this big geographical separation between the east side, where the 2.5 tribes are going to be, and then all the other tribes on the west. Okay, it's a natural barrier. So the potential negatives that Moses points out to them are this. And he states, these are the ones that he stated. It might be because you're fearful. You just don't have enough faith. It might be that you don't want to be unified with God's people. It might be that you want to separate and not be identified with the rest. You want to be your own people. It might be because you simply don't want to take the inheritance that God has planned for you. You've got a different plan. It might be that you don't want to go to battle with your brothers. But implied, those are the things Moses stated in his rebuttal, but I think there's some other things that are implied. It could be that they don't want to continue under Joshua's leadership. It wasn't stated, but that's a concern. We'll establish our own leader. We don't want to be under God's authority anymore. We'll do our own thing. We don't want to be restrained to worship God only. That's a restraint. We don't want to just follow the laws that God has set. We'll establish our own thing. We'll be a separate people. We may, worship the same God, but we're going to be our own thing over here. Okay, so those are the concerns. Well, let's go to the benefits of Canaan proper. Why would it be good to go to Canaan proper? The tribes that would be in Canaan proper would be in close proximity. So there would be a natural uniting. They'd be unified by proximity, and they'd be identified as a distinct people there. They'd be close by the center of worship, which is at Jerusalem. And then there'd be this, a greater degree of safety and protection. Safety from the influence and potential aggression of other foreign peoples. So on the east there was more potential for the influence of idolatrous nations and the thinking of idolatrous people. And there was more potential for other foreign invaders to come in and take their land. And in fact, historically, this did happen. In particular, all three of the tribes on the east had difficulties with invasion. They were the first ones to be invaded. But the land of Moab, for example, to the south, gradually over time, they took over more and more of the territory of Reuben, until most of the territory of Reuben was simply absorbed into Moab. So it was a real concern, a real fear. But this is the thing, when the 2.5 tribes responded to Moses, it really was with a right heart. That's what we need to see. And that's what Moses detected. Their heart was right. And so they're saying these things. We will provide for our families and our little ones here and our livestock, but we will not be separate from the rest of Israel in our hearts. That's what Moses wanted to hear. We won't separate. So we will go to battle with the rest of the nation. We will identify with them. We're going to be part of God's people. We will not be our own people here. And we will help them take their inheritance. We will join with them in going to battle. We will not return to our homes until all of our brothers on the west have taken their inheritance. Inheritance says, that's plural, yes. And then we will come back. And then we will settle in our area afterwards. So we will not put our needs above the needs of of the rest of the people. And I think it's worth noting here that Moses really had kind of jumped to conclusions. His response initially was kind of impulsive, where he criticized them and basically came in judgment against them. And so when Moses saw that the hearts of the people really is right, he's backing off. So let's go to some possible applications to today. I think sometimes people find themselves on the periphery, there's the word again, okay? Kind of on the edge. And I think that there's three main reasons why that might happen. One is simply by choice. They choose to be on the periphery. That's where they want to be. They don't want to be in the center of where everything's happened, but it's a choice to be on the periphery. Okay. Sometimes it's simply due to circumstances. It's circumstantial. And that was the case with the 2.5 tribes. We are shepherds, we are herdsmen, and this is a good area for our flocks and our herds. And so it was a very practical decision, circumstantial. I think sometimes being on the edge or being on the periphery is a matter of perception, our perception also. So sometimes that's what it is. So maybe we want to be on the inside, but we simply feel like we're on the outside. Maybe that's you, okay? You don't feel, you want to be in close connection with the rest, but you don't feel the connection. You feel somewhat separate. They feel on the outside and not included. Is there necessarily then a negative? And the answer once again is it depends. So there can be. Moses is greatly concerned, remember that. And he lists all of the negatives. And I think that there are many Christians who willingly stay on the edge and don't grow in their faith a lot. They're just happy with being on the edge of things. So they stay kind of in between the things of God and the things of the world, and they're very happy and content to stay right there. I think many people will choose a very large church for that reason. They want the experience of church, but they really don't want to be a part. You know, they don't want to connect. They don't want to take time to talk to people. And I am not, that's not true of all Christians that are attending large churches. We've got some good friends that are very strong Christians that attend a very large church called Pure Heart, for example, in Glendale. And so I know that there are many strong Christians, and there's definitely a place for larger churches. But you can get lost in a larger church, right? You can have no accountability, just come and go, and no one's going to bother you. And I think there are a lot of people that that's just fine with. But you have chosen to be here, and we are a smaller church by comparison. We're larger than some, but we're a lot smaller than a lot. I take it to mean because you're here that you want connection. You want to be part of, you want to identify with a spiritual community. You want to make connections with people. You want to establish friendships and build relationships. So that's my presumption here is why you're here. And so that really leads us to the fact that there doesn't have to be a negative in being on the outside or being on the periphery. And we see that because Moses accepted the plan. It was a little bit out of his box. He wasn't thinking that way, but he accepted their proposal and said, okay, if your heart's right, and there's reasons for why you want to be over on the east, go do it. We're okay. And it is important to know, I think, that the 2.5 tribes that were over on the east were always accepted as a part of Israel. It never was a matter of they were excluded in any way from the rest of Israel. They were always a part. They felt a part, and the people felt that they were a part. So how does being on the periphery not become a negative? I think it would have become a negative for the 2.5 tribes if they had stayed separate, if they had become a separate people, practicing their own faith in their own way. Negative. Because the faith that Jesus taught and left us is a social faith. It's a faith that is about coming together, connection, being unified with the rest of God's people. So I want to give some solutions and maybe suggestions on not making being on the outside a negative. It's simply identify. And this is a heart thing. You've got to identify in your heart with God's people, be that here or other Christians, and not just on the internet, right? And I really feel that that's important in person. A real faith community, I feel, is important. And then build relationships, make friendships with other people. And I do feel that usually it's a 50-50 responsibility on that. Some of you will wait until others come and make the connection first. And if you're new to a church body, that's the way it is. But if you're not new, you've been here for a while, it's 50-50. It's the responsibility of doing that, I think, is on you as well as on the others. And then participate together, doing things together, fellowshipping together, worshiping together, studying together, praying together. These are all things that bring connection and identity with the body. But really the biggest danger of being on the periphery is when you're on the periphery with God. So let's just take a moment here. You're neither all in as a follower of Jesus, nor are you all out. You're right there on the edge. You're in between your commitment to follow Christ and your commitment to the desires and pleasures of the world. You're just hanging out right in the middle. Jesus raised concerns about those that he called lukewarm. And he really raised the question of genuineness. If that's where you're going to hang out, very intentionally, because you don't want to grow, you don't want connection, just a little bit of religion on the one hand, but I really want my life in the world also. That might be what he was talking about when he talked about those that are lukewarm. Think also of his parable that talked about the sower and the seed. So of the 4 different soil types, and the farmer sowed seed in all different soil types, only one was a good soil, where the seed took root and grew. And eventually the other seeds that were sown in other kinds of soil faded away. They simply were not genuine in the end. Okay? So bringing it all together here, during the COVID pandemic, there were many Christians, including us, who worshiped online. We had to. We didn't have a choice there for a while. There was a time there when we had opportunity to come back, and most of us were very, very glad to do that. But did you know a lot of Christians just stayed online? There were a lot that just stayed online. And it's a mistake. It really is. There's something about being together. There's something about the flesh and blood connection with people that you don't get online. And it's an important part of what God planned us to be, his purposes for us. My sister did this during the COVID pandemic. She went online, just as all of us did, but then was not very quick at all to come back to her church when basically the concerns were over. Now, she had some definite practical reasons. Her husband had ill health at that time, and he has since passed away. But there was concerns about airborne viruses at that time, and that was one of her big concerns. So that would be a lot of the reason. But she was not quick at all to come back to live worshiping during that time. A couple of years ago, my brother and I were out in Oregon, where she lives, and we just encouraged her to get back to a church connection with real live people. And she eventually did that, and she would say that it was the right thing to do, and she was glad that we encouraged her to do that, and it's made a difference. The church also, when we're talking about inclusion, the church bears some responsibility on this. So I want to take you back to a time when I was first married. We had 2 young children, and we are attending a new church, and we wound up staying there for a while, but it was a new church to us, a church of 300 or 400 people, and there was a church picnic, the dreaded church picnic, which is difficult when you're new. See, I get that, and I know some of you have felt that way. It's difficult, but yet you want to make connections with people, and so you go. So we brought our food, and they put all the food together, in a central area. It was kind of a potluck style, and so we went through the line and got our food. And then we just saw the different people of the groups were scattering, different places, little groups or families here and there, everywhere, okay, and sitting down, and we absolutely didn't know what to do. And so we just staked out a little area on the grass for the four of us, my wife and I and our two children, and we sat down by ourselves. It felt pretty awkward. And so shortly thereafter, a woman that we had met earlier, and I don't remember if it was like a week earlier or that same morning, but it was from the adult Sunday school class that we had attended. Just barely knew her, but she said, came over and she said, why don't you come over and join us? And so we did. And the tension that had built up to that point just kind of dissipated at that time. And I date our connection with that church and feeling like we were a part of things to the action of that woman. So I tell that story to say we as a church body bear some responsibility on being inclusive, okay? It's your job. It's not Sean's job just to do that, and he does the best that he can, but he can't do that job by himself. You have got to be involved in including people, okay? So we were created with this need for connection. I just believe in that so strongly, and belonging. The question of where do I belong is an important question that we all live with that question. Who's my people? Where's my tribe? What group of people do I identify with? I do believe that we are most happy and fulfilled in our lives when we are in connection with other Christians, especially people in general, but other Christians in particular. That is where our happiness, our most happiness comes. And that's the purpose for a Christian community. A big part of it. There are other purposes, but that's a big part of why we exist as a Christian community. There's simply great value and benefit to coming together, to belonging, to connecting. So if you find yourself on the periphery, on the edge, or maybe you just feel you are, just take some steps towards identity with God's people and participating together with God's people. But if you're on the periphery with God, that's a little bit of a different story. Okay? So you're partway in, and by the way, if that's you, you're partway in, that's great. That's good. Okay? But Jesus wants you to come all the way in. Okay? I commend you for being partway in. I don't mean to just put a negative on that. But Jesus wants you to come all the way in, be fully connected. Would you bow your heads with me? I want to pray about that because we may have people here that feel like you're on the periphery, but specifically let's talk about on the periphery with God. I want to pray with you, and I'm just going to ask you if that's you. I would like to be specific. I'm not going to do anything, call you up or anything like that, but if you feel that's you, I'm on the periphery with God, and I want to take steps to come all the way in. Anyone would raise your hand and say, I will direct my prayer that way. Okay, anybody? Okay. Okay, let's pray. Lord, there is a strong message here for us to identify with you, but also with your people. I pray, Lord, that what we've talked about today would be an encouragement. I've really prayed that way, Lord, that you would take it and encourage those that just don't feel like they belong. They feel like they're on the edge. And perhaps no one even cares or knows about them. I pray that you would cause us as a faith community to connect with those and bring them in and make the connection happen, Lord. But I pray for encouragement on those that maybe are on the outside with you. They have taken just a partway step of connecting with you, but they still are on the outside. They've not come all the way in. Lord, I just pray that you would draw by your Spirit and your love and your grace to that one that's right there on the edge, in between you and the rest of life out there, Lord. Draw that person in today. Let there be steps taken that will bring them into firm connection with you, right at the center of what you want to do, Lord, firmly connected, identified with you. So I pray that way, and we commit this to you, and we just believe, Lord, today that you're working in a lot of different people's hearts. In Jesus' name, amen.
Go ahead and stand with us. Let's close out just singing Good, Good Father. You're a good, good Father.